Welcome to the You're Not Crazy podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in healing from narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way. You can connect with Jessica and find additional resources, content, and coaching at emotionalabusecoach.com.
Hello, and thank you for being here today on New Year's Day. It's weird having the holidays be smack in the middle of the week because it just feels like there's obligation surrounding them, or schedules are just really thrown off. And so thank you. I really appreciate you taking time to listen, to be here, and I hope that this helps. Because if you have been here, if you know me, if you know my work, you know that I am not one to sugarcoat anything. And so this podcast is going to be that too. It is going to acknowledge the strangeness of the new year and how it feels. Especially when you are healing from emotional abuse. It could be feeling really positive right now. It could be feeling really scary, but the purpose is really so that I am able to connect some of those dots for you and give you a perspective that may not be one that's in the mainstream media right now. And so before we get started, if you are looking for coaching, if you are looking for support, if you're looking to connect with me, you can find me at emotionalabusecoach.com. I have courses, I have call offerings. A clarity call is meant for ongoing coaching. It's for us to connect to see if it's a good fit. A validation call is a one-off call that, you and I may not connect again after that, but it is really to help you understand what you're going through and guide through a lot of those beads so you have an understanding of what's going on, and usually end that call with some steps that you could take to continue to unravel where things are. And if you don't follow me on Substack, and if you don't know what Substack is, it's a blog, essentially, but I am working, and I have been working this year to make it into a community. I will be sharing a lot of offerings on it this year because for those that can't afford coaching, or it's not accessible, or maybe it's not appropriate at this stage of your healing, it is a great tool. And I've really enjoyed reading other people's Substacks and joining those communities and participating on their calls and things like that. And so I've really worked this year to create consistency on mine. And now you can join it by using the link in the show notes, or searching Substack Jessica Knight Coaching. And there's a lot that I'm going to be sharing on there throughout this year. It's $8 a month, which right now is discounted to $6, I believe, for the rest of this month. So I'm going to get into the topic because I trust that if you do want to work with me, you'll read the show notes and reach out. And I feel like this is a really strong, well, maybe not strong. It's a rough topic this time of year. And the new year, I have always traditionally really liked New Year's Eve. I felt like maybe when I was younger, I always thought that this would be a bit of a fresh start. I guess I like the turn of the year for some reason. However, I do feel like as time has gone on, it can feel quite strange because it's become such a societal checkpoint that's like, it's time for a fresh start. It's time to reinvent yourself. And when you are either healing from emotional abuse, realizing that your relationship is over and that you need to get divorced, or feeling trauma bonded, or really when crashing into the new year. There's been years that I've been in bathroom stalls crying, kind of afraid to enter the new year. There have been times where, I would get into disagreements, with a partner, and I would just really hope that somehow something would click for them, that it would end, or even that as the turn of the year, and this was one year that I was healing from emotional abuse, I was like, I need this year to be different. I have let myself hibernate and like cocoon and really think about like what I was feeling. And then when you enter the new year, I was like, oh my, like I need to put some things into place to kind of get myself moving, even if it's a coach, if it's a this, if it's a that. But I think that there's like a lot of pressure. And when we are healing, we don't need more pressure, right? If we wanted more pressure, all we needed to do is probably talk to ourselves, because we put a lot on ourselves, expect like, you shouldn't feel this way and all of that. And so I want to talk about like what happens when we're just kind of like tired and then exhausted, and the idea of starting fresh feels less inspiring and more like just another item on the to-do list. And now, for someone who's been emotionally abused, the idea of a new year and new beginnings, it feels probably more like pressure and not hopeful. The world is talking about like new year, new you. And if you've been really pushed down emotionally by the abuser, you might be thinking like, I don't know who I am anymore. So how can I start fresh? I don't even know where I'm starting from. And New Year symbolizes hope and potential for a lot of people. But if you're in an emotionally abusive relationship, it's like holding a mirror up to all the things that the abuser has said about you, that they have claimed is wrong about you. They thrive on dismantling your sense of self, and likely have also convinced you that you are incapable of change or undeserving of it. And so when January 1st rolls around and, the world is focusing on like various different things, it could feel like everybody's healthy except for you. And that voice that's probably so ingrained in your head, from many, many years of abuse, whether you're in the relationship or not, is saying something like, you'll never change, you're not strong enough, you're a mess, you're broken, you're the problem. And whether you're in the relationship or not, the abuser gets to live rent free in your head. And so it weaponizes that sense of hope that is in the air, and it turns it into a sense of shame. Like I think a lot of us feel like maybe nothing can be better. And that's also kind of driven by our trauma responses, because we are being traumatized. And I have spent years surviving abuse, and I remember the thought of setting goals felt laughable. Like, what goal am I going to set in this environment? Like, I'm barely able to do the things that I am, quote unquote, like supposed to do. What goal do you want me to set? Because when we're in survival mode, the idea of like dreaming or like creating a Pinterest vision board feels like dangerous. It's like, oh, so I'm going to put all the things I want on this thing, and then it's just going to upset me more. And so if you have felt like you failed, or if you felt mocked by somebody, we kind of teach ourselves not to hope, because this is like the hard truth of it, is that when we are abused, we are trauma bonded. And that trauma bond tells us this is as good as it gets. Don't bother trying for more. We say that in our head, and we have that said to us. And that's a lie. It's a lie that abusers tell us to keep us under their control. And now that I am, years out of my own personal abusive relationship, plural relationships, it breaks my heart when people carry that lie into the new year, thinking that their life is set in stone, or this is what it's going to be, because it doesn't have to be this way. Like, I remember a former partner telling me on New Year's Day, you look like your dog just died. I didn't have a dog, but like, apparently I looked dead. And I was like, I think my first thought was probably like, well, like, thank you for asking me how I'm doing, in a sarcastic way. But really, like, it probably was like, yeah, because I'm fucking miserable. Like, I am fucking miserable. And I do not want to go another year with you. And the new year, I think, can also feel very isolating. I have mentioned this before, but I'm definitely in like a social media break outside of my business Instagram. And so while everyone is out there like posting resolutions and stuff, I remember feeling really triggered, even seeing just people out. Like, how did they get out? Like, the idea of putting on makeup and something that was like flashy felt impossible for me. It felt like, I mean, almost as hard as breaking the trauma bond. And if you're still healing, it could feel like you're already behind before the year even started because you don't even want to acknowledge that there's a new year. One New Year's Eve, I think it was 2019 into 2020, I felt so drained, and it wasn't the kind of like tired that sleep could fix or that I could identify as burnout. It was like soul level exhaustion. Like I'd been running on empty for too long. I wasn't happy. I was miserable, and I felt like I was just existing, not actually living. And I remember wondering how I could keep going like that in that way for another year. And I didn't want to stay stuck in that limbo. But I also didn't want to chase an unrealistic version of myself. And at that point, it was like an old version of myself. Like I didn't want to get back to my old self because that person really didn't exist anymore. Like that old self wasn't around. And I don't know that she would have served me really. There are parts of it that I wanted, but I wanted new parts. And I remember it was around like right before, it was like late in December that I got a new coach. And I remember I was like, okay, I need to break this. And I ended up hiring a coach. We actually, like, she also wasn't doing anything that Christmas. And like, I remember we had our first session on Christmas, and I was like, I need this. And I was so grateful because I felt really, really seen by her and also supported, but also that like, okay, I am taking the step and I'm going to use the step. Like I'm going to use this for what it is. And it doesn't mean I didn't struggle. I really struggled. Like I really struggled with my mindset throughout my entire coaching relationship with her. But what I did get was that accountability and that person and someone to say, I see you and I'm here. And one thing that I worked on with her was that I got to create like the version of myself that I wanted to be. And in a way, it was like a version that prioritized calm over like the word happy. And because I didn't want to necessarily be happy, I wanted to be okay. I didn't need fireworks or like grand gestures, really. I need steadiness, and I need to build trust in myself. I needed to feel like I could breathe again at the time. And that felt like a monumental task because the new year had always had a way of amplifying everything that I was struggling with. And I always felt like I went crashing into the next one. And for me at this time, calm didn't necessarily mean being passive. I was doing a lot of work on my thoughts. And it wasn't about giving up or resigning myself to a life I didn't want. It meant finding these pockets of quiet, whether it was like doing a breathing exercise and holding myself to it, or stepping outside for fresh air, or saying no to things that I didn't actually want to do. It was about creating space for myself in a life that felt too overwhelming and too loud at the time. It also meant that I was no longer going to listen when the abusive person wanted a fresh start or that they wanted to hoover me back in. There was no, it's different now. I'm different now. Let's start over. Or this new year can be our fresh start. I love you so much. Why are you holding on to the past? Let's move on together. And, I started to really hear that for what it was, which is, let me keep my hooks in you and don't you dare move forward without me. And I was like, no, I don't want to spend another year being stuck because I know what this looks like and I know what it feels like. And I don't want to do that anymore. And so if you are recovering from emotional abuse or healing from trauma or simply navigating this tough season, you know that a lot of the things that people are doing might feel really hard. And at this time, this was like simply like, how can I calm down the noise? And that became my focus. It wasn't necessarily about starting something new. It was more about trying to get some of the toxicity and the weeds and the spider webs out of my head so that I could actually think, and that And that was really hard. I've had a lot of clients coming to me this year, or at least this time of year, around saying things like, the manipulative person is throwing everything in the book to keep me stuck. And it feels impossible to just sort of like hold the line in a way. But I think that in this period of a new beginning, we can really put some focus back on what is it that we actually need. And last year was actually one of these years for me. I entered the new year. I wasn't necessarily like sad. I wasn't necessarily destroyed. I was like quite exhausted, but I also had herniated a disc in my back that December at the very end of the month. And I'm somebody who like connects my mental health to my movement. And so that injury felt like really devastating. And moving my body is not just exercise. It's like how I ground myself, how I process emotions, how I connect with the world. Some days it might be the one thing I do for myself all day. And I really enjoy it. I've always enjoyed it. And so losing that ability, it was terrifying. And it was in an instant. I literally like picking up a barbell of 200 something pounds to not being able to lift my daughter. And it forced me to listen to what my body was really asking for and what my mind was asking for. And my body that had been trying to beg me to calm down and to slow down and to really put some intention around what I was doing. I was in a relationship and the relationship was like quite draining. And like when I talk on this podcast about the person with BPD or, like I can't diagnose him. Obviously, I don't know if he has that, but a lot of his behaviors are he has a lot of BPD traits, is what I'm trying to say, like extreme, including the way in which the relationship ended. But he wanted so much from me. And it was like, I kept saying no. So like I was holding the boundary and I was getting a lot of consequences from it. But it was like, now my body was saying no too. And my body was saying no. And it was also saying, now you can like, here you go. You need to take care of yourself. I was also sick like most of December last year. I believe I ended up getting COVID, but then I had it for like 3 weeks and it was like, would not go away. And I felt like I was like really pushed to slow down. I then lost my health insurance. And so I took it as a sign. I took it as my body wants me to not ignore it anymore. And this was right around the turn of the year. And it just sort of amplified the boundaries that I needed for the outside world. And it reminded me a lot of how I used to work with people in the past. And when I first started coaching, I really worked a lot with people that were in like a quarter life / midlife crisis. Like that kind of was my sweet spot. It's like you're in this place and you don't know what you want and you don't know what to do and you need to sort that stuff out. And that is when and how I started working with people in a coaching relationship many years ago. And then I always attracted people with toxic relationships and ended up getting tons and tons of training on these topics and switching my business over time. But I still have and still use a lot of the foundational pieces that I work with people on that were like trying to connect to themselves. And so every year I've either intentionally or unintentionally taken a lot of those practices. And when I hurt myself, I really went back to the basics of what do I need in order to show up for myself. And like this time last year, it was, I need to go for a walk. Like I need to walk for like 20 minutes a day because that was like the one thing that my chiropractor said, like, if you do one thing, you have to, and there was a lot of other things I did, but that was what I needed to do for me. And then it was like around what else, if I can't do a lot of these other things, how can I make some adjustments? And when I used to work with the other population, what I would do is we would come up with a set of promises to ourselves. And everybody's are different. And I say that all the time because it is really important that's acknowledged. Like, because what works for you and what you need may not work for me. It may actually do nothing for me, but you need that. And so you should give that to yourself. Whereas for me, the things I need, they might be very specifically me, but the more and more that you show up for yourself, it's like pouring into that cup that's really empty, and that feels really empty when we are healing from emotional abuse. A lot of times, somebody healing from emotional abuse struggles with executive functioning because of the long-term stress. Like, our brains are like wired for survival, not for forward planning, especially when you're in a trauma response. So many people look at the new year about taking action when you might actually just feel paralyzed. You might feel like you don't have the energy, the clarity, or the resources to even start. You might still be grieving time you lost, the person you were, the relationship you thought that you had. And so how can we begin to get that back in some way? What I do for my own self, I do work with clients on is like, what can we do? What promises can you make to yourself? And they can be anything. But I would make them something that you can really look at and feel proud of. It is not about like treating the symptoms. It's about making adjustments so that, and maybe like realizations that you can count on that you're showing up for yourself. So like, I have a client who her promise is that, or one of her promises is that she puts the phone on the other side of the room and she bought an alarm clock. That is such a small change, but it makes such a difference for her because she's not checking her phone in the middle of the night. She's not scrolling before she goes to bed, and it is on the other side of the room. So she chooses when she picks it up. She's a single mom. She doesn't need to be picking up her phone first thing in the morning, and like, then it's a choice when she goes to it. That works for her. And that is what, one of her promises is like, my phone is on the other side. I have clients that have promises around how much water they drink because that's how they feel like they're really taking care of themselves. Mine is movement. It's one of them. It's like, and it is a natural one for me, but on the days that like my body is like not needing like a heavy workout, I have to promise myself that I'll go for a walk. And it has to be a walk that's like without my dog, like, because I can't be pulled by the leash. That doesn't actually help my back, but it's more like, this is a walk that's actually just for me. It's for me and my podcast. One of the promises I'm implementing this year is a gratitude practice of writing down specific things every night. I have gone up and down, left and right with this practice. There's been years that I've been consistent and then it falls off, but I know I feel better when I'm really leaning into it. And so just writing down 5 specific things every night is a promise I'm making to myself. Kind of, I've been flip-flopping like since December, but I'm trying to get like 30 days of being consistent. I've had clients that have felt like they need to be out on a run, or like there's certain family members they want to call, or they want to be consistent with a religious practice. They want to meditate for 5 minutes. One client really felt like, because she, before the abuse, she like really focused, like she loved putting on her makeup in the morning and it was like part of her day. And she felt so much better with it on. That was hers. It was like, she was like, I need to like put that time into myself in the morning. And so all of these things, they're all unique to different people, but they pour into the cup that has been drained. And it's your promises. I had a promise once about only having 2 drinks if I went out. This is when I was like, I don't know, like 23 or something. And it was because like I made really unhealthy decisions when I drank more. I don't drink really anymore at all. I think it's been about a year since I've had one. Like, I guess the easiest way to say it is I don't like how I feel when I drink. I don't like how I feel at all. And I really care about being able to be present the next day and not having things throw me off. Like, my own brain can throw me off. I don't need other substances, but that's something that when you think about it, it's like, what are those things that are going to make you feel like you? And maybe it has to do with like, what are the things that you need right now? And if you are healing, one thing that could possibly be helpful is if you take a tiny step or make a list of like, what are the small steps that I need to do to begin to leave? It could be finding a time to journal, maybe finding a place to keep that journal that keeps it safe, but like to really ungaslight yourself. That might be what you feel like you need. But whatever it is, really thinking about, what do I feel like I need right now, even if it doesn't make sense. If you decide that what you need is to like make all your meals, or cook all your meals rather, because that's going to help you feel like good on the inside, then that's what you need. Don't second guess it. If you feel like you really need to check in with a certain friend once a week, maybe that is what your promise is. But instead of thinking about these like big overarching like intentions, resolutions, I would think about how can I show up for myself? Because that will help you focus on how you want to feel, right? Like you want to feel a bit better. You're listening to this because you want to feel a bit better. And I know, from healing from emotional abuse is that we typically feel weak because we're feeling so crappy or broken or that we're failing, but you have been through hell, and pushing yourself to feel really positive about a new year doesn't make it like feel really good. It actually makes it feel like it's a mountain that you like clearly can't climb. But it's more like, how can I begin to pour a little bit into my cup and show up for myself? Because I deserve that. And I can create something that feels sustainable that's going to help me overall. Because anybody can do this, and you can do this at any time of the year. And if you promise yourself something and you decide, you know what, that was not what I needed, then let it go. Find something else. Find something better for you. I made a promise once that I was going to like get dressed as if I was going into an office every day. And I don't even know why I wanted to do that. I really think it was like, I have an office, but I obviously don't need to like, get like dressed up every day. But I think it was because like I was spending some time downtown and like I had all these various meetings, and like the days that I was like dressed that way, I was feeling a bit better. But it was also like, okay, but like I feel better because I don't do it that often. It's not annoying, but I was doing it. And I was like, you know what? This isn't it. I just want I want to elevate myself throughout the day, but I don't need it to be that specific. So I changed the promise. But again, it was just for me. Nobody knew. It was just for me. And so I hope this is helpful. I know that when you're healing from abuse, it could feel like the new year is impossible. But I hope this allows you to help you create some space for yourself, no matter where you are in your journey. And like, I've been very open on this podcast of how much help I've received along the way. And so if you do need help, if you need support, of course, reach out to me, Jessica at jessicanightcoaching.com, and really allow yourself to calm down the voice of the world and just really ask yourself, what is it that I need right now? And if you don't know the answer, that's okay. Just let the silence be there and then ask again when you feel ready. What do I need right now? Because when we're burnt out, we might not know. But the people that are hurtful will use words that will haunt you. They make you question your worth. You've been punished for probably wanting more and trying to focus on yourself. New beginnings might feel like a trap, and you might be exhausted to even imagine setting any goals. So just try and set some promises, and that's how you can show up for yourself this year. I hope that this was helpful. And if you need any support, you can find me at emotionalabusecoach.com, at high-conflictdivorcecoaching.com, and on Instagram at emotionalabusecoach.